So if we continue with our Gemara, we are in Yoma, Ayin Hey Yomad Aleph 75a. I'm going to apologize to the viewers that I don't have the text on the screen. The last couple of days I've been having the text on the screen, but we're going to get back to that, God willing. And we're very excited to actually be with people around here, not just the screen, and at least near our building, even if not in the building. Okay, so the Gemara in 75a in Yoma is discussing the manna from heaven. Yoma, as we discussed here, is the laws of Yom Kippur. The last tract that we were studying is the laws of Yom Kippur as they pertain to today. And the first thing the Gemara did was identified how we know that one is supposed to fast on Yom Kippur. The verse says that a person should inflict pain upon oneself on Yom Kippur. It doesn't say fasting, it just says inflict pain upon yourself. And the question is how you know what that means. So the word used is inoi. Inoi means that's the word used to describe inflicting pain. And the Gemara compares that. There's a few different answers how we know that it means fasting, as we discussed in the previous classes. But the last thing the Gemara says is that with respect to the manna, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden at the end, he tells them, God inflicted pain upon you and he starved you. And then he fed you the manna to test you, to let you know that Hashem is the one that provides. So the word inui, inflicting pain, comes in context of starving, not eating. God starved you. And that's how we know that the word inui, inflicting pain upon yourself on Yom Kippur, means to not eat, to starve yourself. Follow?
The verses are together?
No, because the words are used the same. Because the same word is used to describe both. In the context of the manna, it's clear that the word inflicting pain means starving, because God says, I pained you and I starved you. And therefore, use the same. If the same word is used to describe inflicting pain in Yom Kippur, then we know it's the same. It should have the same meaning if the same word is used. And thus we know that inui on Yom Kippur means inflicting pain upon yourself. So having raised the verse with respect to the manna, the Gemara now discusses the manna. Right? The Gemara went on a detour, which is discussed in the last two classes, detour of some sagely advice from King Solomon and other such things. And now the Gemara gets back to the actual discussion on the manna itself. And actually the word that the Gemara is about to quote comes from last week's parsha, from Balotcha. So it's the line, that's the narrow set of lines, the last line of the narrow set of lines. The line begins with the word Hadama. Right? Next page. Ayin Hey Yomad Aleph. It's the second page in the packet there. And the last line of the narrow set of lines begins Hadama. See it? And then the fifth word is Zacharnu. You have it? Yeah. The first word is Hadama. Okay. So this is from last week's parsha. After the Jews complain that they want to have meat, right? So the Jews say, right? The Jews say, we remember the fish we had in Egypt. We remember the cucumbers, the melons. Sorry?
They said it was free.
Yeah, we remember all the free food we got in Egypt. And they list specifically fish, cucumbers, and melons. Garlic and onions, right? And what else they say? Leek, they said also? Kishun, that's cucumber. Maybe it's leek.
No, it was cucumber too.
And they say, and all we have now is manna. Not fair. We want more. So, as I mentioned in the previous classes here, this falls in the context because the manna essentially, it's amazing because it comes from heaven. But the downside is you're spoiled. They didn't work for their food. And because they were spoiled, they're constantly complaining. That's the nature of things. Someone who works hard for a living doesn't complain about what he has. He knows what he earns, and everything he gets, he's thankful that he has. Right? But when a person gets something for free, when it's not exactly the way they want it, when a person's spoiled, like a child, they're spoiled, and if it's not exactly the way they want it, they start complaining. That's what happened to the Jews in the desert. So the Gemara now begins to analyze that verse. So that's this verse. Zacharnu is hadaga. The Jews say, we remember the fish, asher noichel b'Mitzrayim, which we ate in Egypt, chinam, for free. And the Gemara comments, Rav Shmuel Rav and Shmuel were discussing this verse. Chad Amar, one said, Dogim. When the verse says we remember the fish we got in Egypt for free, it means literally fish. They got free fish in Egypt for some reason. The Chad Amar, one says, Arayos, this refers to intimate relationships that was wantonly available in Egypt, and they were complaining that now with the new rules of Torah, we can't have as much fun anymore. That's essentially what they were complaining about. They can't be as promiscuous. And the Torah is speaking euphemistically. Instead of speaking using such coarse language, it's using more subtle language by saying fish. Okay, so that's the discussion between Rav and Shmuel. Now the Gemara analyzes that conversation and says, Manda Amar Dogim, the one who says that the word fish means literally fish, Tiksiv, because the verse reads, Noichal, we ate. It says we ate. Not the fish we had, but the fish we ate. So if we ate, it means they're talking about literal fish. Manda Amar Arayos, and the one who says that fish is not literal fish, but it's a euphemism for forbidden relationships, or for just prevalent intimacy. Tiksiv, his backup is, because the verse says, Chinam, it was free. And it doesn't make sense that the Egyptian taskmasters would give free food. I think there's even a verse which says that they didn't give them food properly. So they're complaining that they had free fish in Egypt. How could that possibly mean food if there were slaves who were being treated terribly without giving free food? Certainly they don't have fish. So therefore he says fish is a euphemism for relationships. He's going to get to a second why he came to that. We're going to see in a moment. And furthermore, says the Gemara, and the one who says it's a reference to relationships, Haksiv Noichal, seemingly the verse says they ate fish. Why using the term Noichal? Eat. Says the Gemara, Lishna Ma'al Yanakat. The Torah is using a more subtle language, a better language, rather than speaking openly about the nature of the Jewish people wanting such bad behavior. So the Torah uses a softer language. It says they ate fish. Wink, wink. You should know what we're talking about, as opposed to saying it straight out. And the Gemara now quotes a verse elsewhere. This verse is in Mishlei, in Proverbs, chapter 30, verse 20, where the Torah uses the word eat in reference to relationships, and says, Achla machta pia v'amra lo pa'alti oven. The verse is describing a promiscuous woman, and this is the way King Solomon describes her behavior. She eats, wipes her mouth, and says, I did no sin.
Just like the Manna.
Exactly. Yeah, so what the Gemara is saying is that the verse there uses the metaphor of eating as a euphemism for relations. So when they say we ate fish, it really means forbidden relations. And he's using this as a proof text to indicate to us that Scripture will use the word eat as a euphemism for relationships. That's essentially what it is, but I'm sure there's a deeper connection, and the floor is always open. Okay, Almanda Amar Dagim, the one who says that fish means literal fish. So my chinam, what does this mean? That it was free. They were slaves. How would they get free food in Egypt? They weren't treated so nicely, they get free fish. So what does this mean that they got free fish? If it literally means fish. If it means forbidden relationships free, because you can just do whatever you want. And that's why it's free. But if we're talking about fish, literal fish, then why is it free? Seemingly they were slaves, and they were not treated so nicely to get free fish. So says the Gemara, that these fish would come to them from unclaimed fish, free fish. Hefker means unowned property. So the fish was unowned. It's not as if the Egyptians gave it to them, but it was like unowned, free available fish they were able to take. Not from the Egyptians, they were able to take it freely. How is that? The Amar Mar, for master taught, I mean we're taught in the teaching. When the Jews would draw water, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mazmin lahem, God would bring to them the Seicha Mayim, within the water that they would take to fill up to drink. Dogim ktanim b'kadeim, small little fish into their jugs. And this was God's way of feeding them God feeding them in their slavery, by giving them little fish when they were collect their water. Which means that when the Jews are saying to God, they're complaining, we remember the free fish we got in Egypt, they're actually talking to what God gave them, not what the Egyptians gave them, which is a different way of understanding the verse, right? When you read the verse simply, you think that the Egyptians were giving out free fish, right? Which itself is hard to understand. Like the Gemara asks, why were they getting free stuff? They were slaves, and especially not fish. But now it makes sense. The free fish was because God gave it to them, and now they're complaining to God. You're giving us manna. You used to give us fish. We got a downgrade in our menu, and that's why they're complaining, right? Okay, now the Gemara continues. Man amar dagim, the one who says that it means literal fish, aval arayis, why is he against he's opposed to the idea that fish is a euphemism for relationships? Because loy pirtzibuhu, because he's of the view that the Jews did not misbehave in Egypt. The Jews did not do that. He doesn't want to say that the Jews were behaving such, so wantonly engaging in whatever was available, to the point that when they came to Egypt, they're complaining to God, you gave us the Torah that forbids us all this stuff. He doesn't want to say that. And in fact, he cites a verse, Hanu the Kasav, this is the meaning of the verse. This verse is in the Song of Songs, chapter 4, verse 12. The whole Song of Songs is a metaphor, is a romantic description between the relationship between God and the Jewish people, so it's all metaphoric language. And there it says, Gan no lachaisi kala, my sister, my bride, is a locked gate, meaning to say that she's chaste. The Jewish people behaved properly. They didn't just freely take whatever is available. Okay, so that makes sense.
Maybe these were the mixed multitudes.
Say again?
Maybe these were the mixed multitudes.
The eight of Rav.
That rebels.
Yeah, the Gemara doesn't identify that, but perhaps. I don't know. Actually, in Rashi, in his commentary on the Chumash, doesn't take any of these views. He says chinam there, free, means they were free of mitzvahs, and they were complaining that now they have to have mitzvahs. You're giving us free food from manna, but we have to do all these rules. And that's what they're complaining about. That's the way Rashi learns it in the Chumash.
In fact, when they were leaving Sinai, packing up the Mishkan, they were running as fast as they could because they were worried that Hashem would give more mitzvahs.
More mitzvahs, yeah. But that's not the way the Gemara learns it here. Okay, so now the question becomes, the view which says that when they complained and say we ate fish for free in Egypt, it's a euphemism for intimacy. What does this mean that they were a closed garden? We still have to contain with the verse which we just quoted in Song of Songs, which described the Jewish people as chaste, which seems to contradict the view which says that they were having fun in Egypt. So says the Gemara, that which was strictly forbidden to them, they didn't do. So the Jewish people, the Jewish people before they got Sinai were classified as regular human beings, which were responsible for the 7 Noahide laws, which were started many years earlier. So they had certain relationships that were forbidden to them. But then, once certain incestual relationships, but once Sinai came, now there's new forbidden relationships that Jews can't do. So the things that were forbidden to them at the time, under the rules of the 7 Noahide laws, that they didn't engage in. So they behaved as far as the letter of the law went. But things that are now forbidden, that's what they're complaining about. The obvious example is a wife having to go to the mikveh. Right? So let's say they were faithful to their wives, because that's the way one's supposed to be even as a Noahide, and they're complaining that now she has to go to mikveh. Let's just say that's what it is. I'm just throwing an example, but it could be other examples in such nature that they were behaving properly, as it were, for a human being, but later now as a Jew there's higher standards, and this is what they're complaining about. So it's not so bad anymore. It's not as if they were behaving like degenerates. It just means they didn't have to live up to the standards that a Jew, the higher standard that Torah expects of a Jew, beyond every human being. Okay, so it's not as bad anymore, right? We've narrowed it down a bit. Further analysis. Bishleim, all is well. Lamanda Amar Adayes. And here, this gets to your point. How do we get from fish to intimacy? Why are we even going there? This gets to your point, because the verse reads as follows. Lamanda Amar Adayes, the one who says that fish is a euphemism for intimacy, Hainu Diksiv, this is the meaning of the verse, which follows right then and there, which says, after they were complained to Moshe, a few verses later, the verse describes, or actually the very few verses later, the verse describes that Moshe Rabbeinu heard the people crying with their families. That's the way the verse describes their crying. Why add that? So Rashi in his commentary on the Chumash just says that they were like making a public scene of their complaint. Instead of just complaining to Moshe, they could have just lodged their complaint and then went back and that's it. But they didn't. They were crying and making it public. My family is starving, they were putting on a whole show. So that's the way Rashi describes it in the Chumash. But the way the Gemara says it here, the fact that the verse says that they were crying over their family is because they were crying al iske mishpachaisav. They were crying over their familiar relationships. That now, that they no longer could be with them in the same way they were before. And that's how he gets to. That's how this view gets to the idea that the verse is talking about euphemism for relationships, because all of a sudden they're crying over their families. What does families pop in here? And therefore he says it must mean something related to their family relationship that's making them cry. That's how he gets to that. So now the question becomes conversely: Lamanda Amar Dagim, the one who says that fish means literal fish. Why are they crying over their families? According to him, why they're crying over their families. If families is there to teach us that it's a euphemism for intimacy, then the one who says it means literal fish, why are we crying over our families here? So says the Gemara, ha v'ha havai. They complain about both literal food and their relationships. They're complaining about everything. Complaining that they didn't get the food they wanted, and they're complaining that they were able to, that they no longer can have the same relationship they were able to have in Egypt. And all of this points to the same theme of the generation of the Egypt as people who were they were spiritually spoiled and physically spoiled. This week's parsha we're talking about the spies and their mistake. All of this puts in context. They don't want to go to Israel because they were spoiled in the desert. Why would you want to go to Israel? You're getting free food. Every time something goes wrong, you complain, and Moshe Rabbeinu fixes it up for you. And now you have to go to Israel and start fighting wars and having kings and armies. And who wants that? They have to cultivate the land and work for their food. They're not interested. But they'd rather the free food, and in such a way, to the point that they prefer going back to Egypt, because the comfort, the security of Egypt, you get your food on time because you're a slave, right? So it's maybe you're not treated so amazing, but I don't have to work the land for my food. I know that I come home at the end of the day, I'm going to get my...
It's like a prisoner who leaves prison, can't make it outside.
Yeah, that's right. It's slavery in the mind. Yeah, slavery in the mind. Not capable of the joys of freedom because they're not capable of the responsibilities of freedom yet. The responsibilities of freedom, the joys of freedom come along with the responsibilities of freedom. And that was something they couldn't do yet. Right?
When they were slaves, they weren't like you and I, like we have a job, we work from 9 to 5.
They weren't employees, no, they were slaves.
They were slaves.
Yeah.
And when they came home after 10 hours of work, if an Egyptian would come over and say, you have to do work for me.
Yeah.
He said, but I have to eat. He said, no, you have to do work for me.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was a cozy life, but there's
So how could you
it's
like
it's like it happens. We should never know about this, but it happens to people who go through serious abuse. They become attached and protective of their abusers, because their brains start to function that this is their security, this is the way they live, and they get stuck that way. It's a mentality. It's a slave mentality that they get out of. That was the hardest thing. And I'm saying, and since it mentions here relationships, the same thing is true of this. The balance of the joy with responsibility, not the balance, but that they come together. And that you can't appreciate the joy of freedom if you're not willing to take responsibility of freedom, take care of yourself and work for yourself. The same thing is true of a relationship, right? If you want to have the joy of a proper intimate relationship, it takes work. It can't be free. if it's free, then it's not going to be that way. Right? If you want the freedoms, the joys of a good relationship, then does work. There's sometimes when there's no, and there's sometimes when there's yes, and there's sometimes when there's respect, and there's sometimes when there's stand back, and there's sometimes when there's give. You have to be in tune with that, and this could be connected to their complaint, as in, and using the word chinam, free. Not necessarily, if you take the word free a little more broadly, not free as in they were got a hand at, but free as in like they didn't have all the restrictions and rules to work to get their joy. This was their life, and this joy, not joy. This is my life. I did it every day, and then that's it. Leave me alone. It was free in that sense. And now all of a sudden, to get to joy, to get to relationship with Hashem, relationship with one's wife, as described here, we're talking about relationships, and all of a sudden it takes rules and regulations, and you can't just do whatever you want and expect it all to be okay. And that's kind of what they were complaining about it, but it was part of the Jewish people's learning curve and maturation. To learn how to be independent in that sense, that to take responsibility for the way they behave, to earn their joy in life, to earn their relationship with Hashem, and to earn their relationship with their families as well.
One thing I don't understand is that they complained about almost everything in the desert.
Yeah.
But they never complained about having to pack up and go, and stop here for 2 days, and then pack up and go.
Interesting.
I mean, they had a lot of work to do.
That's very interesting. They never complained about packing up and moving. For sure. And sometimes it was one day, within a day.
The Mishkan, they had to take it all apart.
That's a very good point.
Go, and 1 day later they'd have to go again.
Very interesting.
Work. That I would complain about.
That's a good point. I don't know. It's a very good point.
It's interesting though also that in one sense they were free.
Yeah.
But on the other hand they had the obligation of more mitzvot, which would appear to be less free. So you have this
it's interesting because on the one hand they also have to work, they have to do mitzvahs.
Right, mitzvah. They have obligations, seeming limitations.
Yeah. Perhaps it gets to the point that when you're a slave, when someone's a slave, they're following the rules is on the terms of the master. Whereas the way Hashem wants us to do mitzvahs is on our terms. It has to be something that we choose, we want. Right? When you're a slave and your free choice is taken away, you don't have the choice not to follow the rules.
Right.
So there's like the sense of security. I don't have to make the decisions. They make the decisions, and they'll deal with the consequences of the decisions. But now Hashem says, here are the rules, and now I step back, do what you want. Now all of a sudden I have to start making choices.
That's the complaint.
That's the real complaint. I have to start making choices to. Right?
What do I do?
You have to do it this way, I have to do it that way. Just, we liked it there. Just give me just force me and give me my food. And now they have to make their own choices, they have to make their own decisions. That's like the joy and responsibility side of the coins of freedom.
Right, the responsibility.
Taking responsibility means you have to make choices. And inevitably, sometimes you're going to make the wrong choice. And you're going to have to live with it. And you're going to have to do tshuva. Right? But that's part of the process of the Jewish people came out of Egypt. It's the birth of the Jewish people, right? And the verse describes the Jewish people in the desert as a young lad, right? God says, I remember the time of your kindful youth when you followed me in the desert. The Jews were called youth then. We're called young for both the positive and the negative. We were fresh, new people, but there's also a sense of immaturity there, right? As a child gets most love from their parents, at least overtly, rather than adult. Little child, you kiss the child, you play with the child, right? But at the same time, it doesn't take away the fact that the child is immature, or maybe it goes hand in hand. It's likewise the Jewish people in the desert. They're getting these revelations from God that we never got, which is why they're referred to as the Dor Deah. They're called the generation of knowledge, because they had face-to-face relationship with Hashem. But at the same time, they're an immature little spoiled child complaining, this is wrong, that's wrong. I have to start taking care of, I have to clean up my own room now, to get the toy. I can't just get it because and that's kind of what part of the process of growing up that the Jewish people had to go through in the desert. Okay, God willing, Mr. Hashem, it'll be nice and sunny tomorrow, and we'll continue, and I hope by tomorrow we'll have the text on the screen for our viewers here. Have a wonderful day.